So I want to thank you so much for sitting with me and having this chat. I have some questions for you that I think are relevant for me, but also relevant for a lot of our viewers as well. And my first question is really about Tantra and the Tantric path. Like, how do I know it's right and fitting for me? How do I know if, this is the route I should or want to go?
It's not so easy to answer simply because in order to know if Tantra is the right path for any individual, the person needs to explore Tantra. We need to know a little bit about what is the Tantric path, what is Tantra all about. And when you get that information, and it doesn't have to be much, but just getting some understanding will give you a lot of clarity if that's the path you want to walk. What I would recommend is to understand the following things. First of all, Tantra is a spiritual teaching. It's a teaching originating in India thousands of years ago. It spread through Southeast Asia, especially in Tibet. And it is a teaching that ultimately is meant to bring a person to self-development, but more than that, to bring a person to high states of consciousness, liberation, and even enlightenment. Now, saying that might confuse people because many think that Tantra is just something to do with sexuality, and that's the understanding that most people have, usually connected with Kama Sutra, sexual positions. That's the kind of scope that people have. But the truth is that Tantra is much more broad, and it is a very sophisticated, very comprehensive system, as I said, which is meant to really bring evolution. Not just a physical evolution, but more than that, a spiritual evolution, an internal evolution of the consciousness of the human being. If an individual feels that they would like to discover the meaning of this reality, to grow spiritually, to become a more advanced human being, and to really develop the mind and develop further than that, even the consciousness, to reach some kind of real and authentic self-realization, then definitely Tantra is for that person. And here, I have to emphasize, authentic Tantra would be the right kind. If we're talking about this modern approach to Tantra that we've seen in the last few decades, where people usually approach it for the sake of sexuality, as we said, that is a very limited understanding. If you read the original Tantric texts, you will find that only 5, maybe 10% of them, or of the texts themselves, talk about sexuality. There's far more than that, very fascinating Tantric teachings from Kashmir Shaivism, from the Kundalini yoga teaching, which is part of Tantra, from the study of the great cosmic powers, from many other things which are there in Tantra that are really amazing to bring about the development of the human being. If an individual says, all I want is just to have an amazing sexual life, and that's what I'm interested in, even then Tantra fits for you. But again, I will insist on the authentic form of Tantra. For example, when we teach the Tantric sexual teachings as part of the Tantric sexuality course, then we actually bring there the step-by-step understanding of how that applies for a man and woman in their sexual interaction, how it brings about change and development within them, and more importantly, what are the practical applications, the step-by-step techniques that they need to do in order to bring a change, to control the energy better, and to achieve amazing achievements that Tantra actually can bring. But that kind of approach, saying Tantra, even the sexual Tantra, will only focus on that. It's like focusing it on the kind of horizontal plane. You just keep looking and looking, but you don't get further. But when you want to go deeper, then you need to go vertical. That's what we say. And the vertical approach is going from where you are now towards something much more elevated. Then you can do that in sexual Tantra. And then it's not anymore just how to make the sex better. It transforms into how to make the sexual experience mind-blowing, divine, and together a couple can bring it into a relationship which is not just a sacred relationship or a fun relationship, but actually making the relationship a spiritual relationship, a divine relationship, and even a relationship that can give to both partners in the relationship a strong boost in their own personal spiritual evolution.
So would it be fair to say, you kind of mentioned this sort of the sacred sexuality, or more of like this superficial Tantra, we could call it, versus like the authentic teachings. It sounds like the sacred sexuality path is superficial. It's kind of just teaching you maybe, I don't know, positions for sex with your partner, or, some of these basic things like how to set up a space or how to create romance or, these types of things, but it doesn't really touch you at the level of the soul. And authentic Tantra, it sounds like it creates almost like a transformation of all partners, and then that sort of transforms the sexual experience. Would that be fair to say, or?
That is true. That is pretty accurate. I would expand on that more by saying that let's step back for a second and understand what are the differences. By understanding the differences, you will understand what different results you can get. I'm trying really not to just directly bash anyone and say this is wrong, this is that, but it's very difficult to talk about Tantra authentically without comparing it to what we see is happening a lot these days. And we have to be honest, and if we want to stick to this authentic teaching, we have to point out the differences. So let's understand that for a moment. When we're talking about the authentic Tantric approach, it's based on the ancient texts, but that doesn't just solve the problem. It means that a person on an authentic Tantric spiritual path would be an individual that, number one, is following a lineage. And lineage means that you have a guru or a teacher or a spiritual master who have reached spiritual success and surpassed the ego and reached hopefully some higher states of consciousness. And therefore, when that person teaches you, they are teaching not from a place of ego, but from a higher plane. And that is not a subjective thing. Because a lot of people, they would say, well, I think I'm there. I am beyond the ego, and I am a great guru, and so on. But you cannot be there unless there are certain confirmed, I would call them concepts or ideas that have been established. In other words, when a spiritual person has reached authentic high levels of consciousness, then that has been confirmed by other spiritual masters who have reached that. And eventually, that's the whole point of the lineage. That means that a spiritual master that have proved themselves, some of them even by achieving paranormal abilities, were able to confirm when a disciple is indeed reached. In the case of the famous Somananda Tantra School, that great yogi who wrote a book called Autobiography of a Yogi, which has become a world phenomenon and everybody knows this book, almost anyone. I think it's even known to be the most favorite book by Steve Jobs, he mentioned himself. So definitely in that book, when you read about the development of the life of the yogi, from a very young age, he was a very spiritually inclined boy. He was always praying, he was always trying to meditate. His biggest desire was not to have a car or to meet beautiful women or, to make money like average people may have. His desire from a young age was always to go in the Himalayas and meditate with the masters and reach high levels of consciousness. How many children do you know that have that kind of aspiration? It already shows something. And then in his life, all he cares about in his teens and later on as he grew up was to be on the spiritual path. He meditated, he searched for gurus. And eventually when he found his spiritual master, his guru, Sri Yukteswar, he saw with his own eyes how this man, Yukteswar, was indeed an evolved human being. It was a living, breathing, Christ-like individual. And by confirming this in many ways, by seeing him, Yukteswar, meditating very deeply, going into high states of consciousness, seeing how he was interacting with the world, having clairvoyance, having all kinds of abilities, that's how he knew that indeed this guru is authentic. And later on, that guru, Yukteswar, indeed brought Yogananda to an enlightened state. And that's how, from a guru to a disciple, we have this kind of authentication, confirmation of an authentic evolution. Why am I insisting on this one? Because today we find a lot of this type of, again, without offending anyone, a kind of superficial spirituality, where people go and do some workshop somewhere, they change their name to a spiritual name, or they do all kinds of things that are supposedly are signs of spiritual development, where they don't actually do the internal work. It requires many years of yoga practice, meditation practice, pranayama, concentration of the mind, to really create an inner transformation. You can take, for example, a certain ore or metal and just expose it to very little heat and hope that it will change in quality. It needs to be exposed to a lot of heat for a very long time that suddenly transforms or maybe have some kind of a chemical reaction. The same thing needs to happen within the human being, and more importantly, within the consciousness of the human being. An authentic Tantra is a tantric practice which is coming from a lineage. Always there is like a chain where there's a guru and a disciple. This may sound weird to people who use these words. You can call it a teacher and a student. And from a teacher to a student, that become a teacher themselves later on, and they have students, and so on, it continues. That creates a kind of an unbroken teaching lineage that goes all the way back, sometimes even to antiquity. Now, just having a lineage is not enough. It must be a lineage of people who actually themselves became spiritual masters, who reached enlightenment or some high states of consciousness, and as a result of that, their teachings were inspired by something divine. And as a result of that, the teaching was authentic. That means it is not coming from an ego place, it comes from being adherent and strict according to the spiritual text, and from a place where the person is indeed very high in their level of consciousness. Then the teachings will have an impact. But when the teachings are brought about by individuals who may be good-willed, good intention, very enthusiastic, but not spiritual masters, not even close in most cases in the lineage Tantra. These are people who have done a few courses here and there. They feel really good about it. They're very excited about Tantra. Usually in the New Age environment, it's the sexual Tantra, nothing else. And Tantra is so much more, but that's what they know. And then they feel that because their spirit is open and they really like it and they want to share it with others, then this is their place. They can teach Tantra. You have a situation where, let's face it, an amateur is trying to teach something which is extremely sophisticated. And then the result will always be what an amateur can produce, which is not very nice. But when the authentic Tantra is being taught by a person who's been authorized by their spiritual teacher, because of their level of consciousness that has been confirmed, because of their results of their many, many years of meditation and spiritual practice, they are there, and they are at the level that they can impart such great spiritual teachings, then those teachings will have a great impact. Tantra was created for transforming the person, for bringing the person to real self-development and authentic spiritual realization. This, to conclude, just brings us to the same old story, which has been even mentioned in the Bible, where you have those famous prophets from the Bible, from the prophet Moses, Elijah, and Samuel, and many of the great prophets. One of the things that they always warn people about is to beware of false prophets. Now, I'm not saying I'm a prophet. All I'm saying is that I follow the spiritual path as an authentic Tantric should. And therefore, for myself, I find it very important to also pass on to people exactly this type of understanding. It's the same with anything else now. If you want to study, economics, or if you want to study how to cook, or if you want to study any skill, you want to study from a person who is a master in their skill. Otherwise, if you study from an amateur, don't expect to ever become a master or to be very professional. You will be an amateur yourself. Same applies for spirituality. And that's why this warning of false prophets basically means don't follow those who are not really there yet.
I guess, you have also mentioned that Tantra is very vast. It's not just about sexuality, and there's all these different kind of branches or paths. I'm not sure the best way to describe it. So where would you recommend that I start? If I want to get on a Tantra path, where do I start? Which branch or path do I start? Is it based on my temperament or something else?
I know many people who joined our courses because they were first and foremost attracted to the sexual teachings. And they're honest about it. I don't see a problem with it. If a person notices that, let's say, I have a lot of sexual energy, I'm very interested in sexuality, this is something, okay, if this is something you really want to change in your life, you want to, get out of this old situation with your partner or with previous partners, and you really want to discover a sexuality which is fresh, authentic, real, deep, significant, that makes you feel happy again to even be sexually, active, then definitely Tantra is the place to go for that. And then if you start the Tantric path, why not start from the study of sexuality, experience it, practice it with a partner who is also interested, most likely that will be better, of course. And then as you do that,
You might expand into Tantric Massage because that can also increase some of the sexual elements, although it's a healing methodology. But you very easily go from there to healing because it's a very, let's call it a neighboring type of subject. And from there, many people actually found themselves very quickly attracted to more yoga and kundalini and other techniques. And then you start on you're not going to start when you're already into the spiritual, the tantric path, although your original intention was more on the sexual side. We should not feel embarrassed or in any way not good, let's put it simply, that I'm going to Tantra just because I'm into sex. Be proud of it, it's fine. I'm a sexual being, I want to experience amazing sexuality, I had enough of the superficial pornographic stuff which is out there. I want to find something meaningful, deep, that will make me and my partner, wow, experience something wonderful and pleasurable and why not expand to orgasm. That's it, that's noble, that's fine. I don't see anything wrong with that. However, if the temperament of the person is more on the philosophical side, on the practice, they want to feel energy, they want to feel how their mind develops, how they can go deeper, there are various ways to do that exactly in that way. And those people, I know many of those who are spirits at the moment, who are not starting by exploring sexuality. For them, that's something which is perhaps secondary or tertiary. And they say, okay, I'm really interested in studying something more spiritual. My soul, so to speak, is yearning to learn more about the nature of reality. What is my purpose in life? And then they may take some of our more esoteric metaphysical teachings, like the metaphysical workshop that we teach, where we go very deep into the meaning of life. I know it sounds funny, everybody says the meaning of life, but there is a meaning to this life. You're not here by accident, and you can learn exactly what this meaning is. So this is a very valuable thing, and many people start from there. Others, they're more interested in Kashmir Shaivism, and some of the more philosophical and even enlightenment teachings that branch of Tantra brings. And there are many others. So, depending on what you feel you are called for, that's where you start from. However, to conclude, I can say one thing. There is no doubt that the vast majority of students, I would say more than 50%, 60%, what interests them first is the sexual teaching. And again, there's no judgment here. It's a beautiful way to start learning Tantra, to improve and to see such amazing results very quickly in their own sexual life, and from there, they open the gates to much deeper spiritual.
So I really want to thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And as for our viewers, I hope you found this interview informative and helpful in many ways. And someone, do you have any last words for our viewers who are maybe on the fence about whether they want to kind of jump into tantric waters or not? I
can understand that for some people, Tantra seems like a bridge too far, or something a little bit scary, and maybe it's a cult, or some people are doing dangerous things. None of that is true, but I would say, well, if you're doing a couple of days taste of Tantra course, for example, where you're just listening, you're getting good online. Nobody's gonna play any tricks on you. It's just simple explanations, simple techniques. Try it for yourself. See how it feels. Do some hatha yoga. Work with your body. Do some asanas. Do some practices. And if you find that this is something that really speaks to you, try it out. If it doesn't, no hard feelings. So that's why you really don't need to feel that this is dangerous anymore. This is something which is really beautiful and has changed so many thousands and thousands of people's lives. Why not give it a try, learn, listen, and make your own decision?